We're starting a new series this morning, and it's new, but it's a continuation of a theme all year long. And because one message is always building on another. I don't think any one message is by itself. It is a product of all that God is speaking to us over the last year and past years. But we're looking at something new, a new topic at least, called Waiting on God. And this is the introduction. Now the subtitle is called The Battle to Cultivate a Deeper Sense of Personal Presence, of His personal presence. I want to show three scriptures. We're not going to look at these scriptures today. We'll develop them in the weeks to come. But I want to give you just three main scriptures. They come from the prophet Isaiah. And we'll start with Isaiah chapter 30, verse 18. And therefore will the Lord wait, and He will be gracious unto you, and therefore will be exalted, that He may have mercy upon you. For the Lord is a God of judgment, and blessed are all they who wait for Him. There is a blessing in the waiting. But He's also waiting. If you look at that verse in the beginning, He's waiting to be gracious to us. So there's a double waiting. There's another scripture that says He works for those who wait for Him. So He's waiting for you to wait on Him so He can work for you. There's a message in waiting. There's a revelation in waiting. There's an experience in waiting. The next verse is Isaiah chapter 64, verse 4. And it says, For since the beginning of the world, men have not heard, nor perceived by the ear, neither hath the eye seen, O God, beside Thee, what He hath prepared for him, or her, that what? Waits on Him. So, in the waiting, you receive what He's prepared for you. But there has to be a waiting. Next verse. Isaiah 40:31. This is one you probably know. But they that wait upon the Lord, they shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. And they shall walk and not faint. So there's something that happens to those who wait on the Lord. You want something to happen? Are you waiting? Here's something that's not in your outline, but you want to write it down because He brought it to my attention this morning. And it's this. If you're not waiting, you're wondering. If you're not waiting, then you're wondering. We'll develop that too in the weeks to come. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11, there's a verse that we're familiar with. It says, Lest Satan should get a hold of us or take advantage of us. For we are not ignorant of his devices. What are his devices? And what is it that we aren't supposed to be ignorant of? Or are we? See, in this day and age, when Paul is writing this, he's teaching the church. So everything he's receiving from the Lord, he's giving to the church, and they're not ignorant of the devices of the devil. But the church today is not grounding itself in Jesus, and the result is we are ignorant of his devices. And I'll show you that in the time to come. There's one device right there. All right. Somebody look up Genesis chapter 3, verse 8. Chapter 3, verse 8. Look it up and tell me what it says. Genesis chapter 3, verse 8. It's going to be hard to find. First book of the Bible, 3rd chapter, verse 8. Somebody, and say it loud. What we got? Daniel, what do you got?
Genesis
3:8.
And they heard the voice of the Lord.
Okay, and they heard the voice of the Lord. This is Adam and Eve. There's only two in the garden. And they heard the voice of the Lord.
God walking in the garden.
God walking in the garden.
In the cool of the day.
In the cool of the day.
And Adam and his wife
And Adam and his wife
hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God
hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God
amongst the trees of the garden.
amongst the trees of the garden. Now, what translation is that?
King James.
Okay. Now, they would listen. See, when the Lord was walking, He was speaking. And they were listening. So I want to set that dynamic up. This was the way God operated in the garden with man and woman. And that is that He would show up and that He would walk in the garden and they would listen because He would speak. So when He's walking, He's speaking because it's the voice of the Lord in the garden in the cool of the evening. But that voice wasn't talking 24/7. It says in the cool of the evening the Lord would show up and speak and they would listen. What I want you to see is they would have to wait for God to show up to speak. They weren't walking with Him 24/7. Adam and Eve, of course, were relating to themselves. And then when the Lord shows up, they would relate to Him. So there's a waiting. I just want you to see this because if they're waiting for God to show up every day. And it was something that, and you've got to know this. How many have anticipated something to happen in your life? Whether you go on vacation or what's coming up, you're like, boy, I can't wait for that to happen. And you're excited about it. Well, I know you're not excited about the voice of the Lord like they were because you're not getting, you're not experiencing it like you should. But for whatever reason, that's between you and the Lord to work out. These two, I could see them waiting with, as Jimmy Swaggart would say, waited with bated breath. I don't know where he gets that from, but that was a common thing. Waiting with bated breath for God to show up. It was the highlight of the day. Would anybody disagree with that? Because if not, tell me what the highlight of the day would be with them. Just eat more from trees? Till some more ground? What's the highlight in the Garden of Eden? They were waiting for God to show up. But something happened that now they're hiding themselves when God shows up. So if you're hiding from God, you're not receiving from God. So they were no longer waiting for God, were they? If they were waiting for God, then they would have seen Him show up. He's looking for them now. Up to this point, they're looking for Him every day. It's about that time. He's going to be showing up. Are you getting this? Something happened. Now they're no longer waiting. Now they're wandering among the trees. Hiding among the trees. Wandering among the trees because they're no longer waiting. Something happened. Of course, it's sin. Now, I'm just showing you that because that was Satan's device. The tree of knowledge of good and evil. When they partook of that tree, they started the life of wandering because they were no longer waiting. Is this making sense? Now, 2 Corinthians 2:11, Paul says, we are not to be ignorant of his schemes, his devices. And we are. We have fallen prey through the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In a way, you're not seeing it. Maybe you are, but we all are. This is not to isolate anybody, pick on anybody. We're all guilty here because we are byproducts of what's going on in our culture and the world. And if you've got your notes there, let's look at the introduction. And let's not get offended today. Let's own this. We're all in this together. Number one, we are products of a generation that does not like to wait for anything anymore. They have accustomed us to be so impatient about everything. Okay? A fast-paced life, get everything now, and we don't want to wait for anything. We don't want to wait for our food, and we want it cooked as fast as we can. This is why the drive-thrus are so popular. We don't want to wait for the internet, because if it buffers just a little bit, we complain. You know, and on your phone, we complain. I want it grease lightning, right? I want it now. And then you've got the microwave. You've got how instant things are becoming, instant potato, instant oats, because I ain't got time to wait. And they have, and then I don't know if it's even, well, there's always a mind behind the system. So you can sit there and say, well, the guys who made instant oats, they weren't doing this to keep me from God. No, they weren't. Okay? But there is a mind behind the system, and this whole thing is designed to get you to a place in life that when you get there, you're like, how did we get here? And I don't know how to get out. And at this instantaneous life culture that we live in, that you want it now, it seeps now into your relationship with God. We don't like to wait in lines. You know as well as I do, when you show up somewhere and there's a lot of cars in the parking lot, you're like, oh God. Or you walk into the place and the line's going back, Walmart line goes, oh man. And I get that. Nobody wants to wait. But see, what happens is we want everything so fast that now when God says, I am to be waited on, you can't. Can't do it. Because that's not your lifestyle. Like your lifestyle is, God, I'm giving you 5 minutes, you need to show up, and I need a word now. If that's the case, walk away. He is not going to bow to that mentality. See, we want God to show up, and we want to hear God, we want to experience God, but we don't want to wait on God to get what He has. And so we're just in this, and God is not going to bow or bend to your fast-paced lifestyle or your quick Hail Mary and He's supposed to come through. This stuff does not happen by osmosis, meaning that just because God wants to bless you, it's just happening while you're sleeping. It's just happening while you're doing your thing, and God's supposed to show up and inject some stuff while you're not even aware of it. That's how we think God should do. I'm too busy to take time for you, so I need you to do this for me while I'm doing my thing. It's like, I need you to work in the background while I'm doing everything in the forefront. Let me say that again. I need you to work in my background, God. I'm not going to pay attention to you. It's like a program that I put on my computer. I need it to be working in the background while I'm working on other things. And God's like, no, I am the thing. Everything else needs to be put in the background. Okay? Amazon has built a successful business by getting packages to you in 1 to 2 days. Why? Because you want it now. We are programmed to be impatient. We're programmed not to wait. We're programmed to get things as fast as we can get it, and everything now is a drive-through mentality. Our attention spans, check this out, number 5, our attention spans are now reduced to 20-second sound bites. Anything longer than that, I'm done. How did that happen? You know, in the old days when teachers or preachers, and when I say teachers, I'm talking about just education, the academic world, when they would write a paper, it would be pages long. Words in there you'd have to look up in the dictionary. And people would read it. And they'd look those words up. How many times have you read something and don't know what that word says, but it's okay, you read on. You don't care to look the word up. And if it's more than 2 pages or more than a page, I ain't got time to read that. In fact, right now on the internet, on Facebook, you'll have little articles and it'll say 2-minute read, 1-minute read. Because they're telling you, this ain't that long, we need you to check. So, because 1 to 2 minute reads about all you can do. And now when you're putting videos together, all the pastors are now reduced down to 20-minute videos. Because they realize you ain't going to go any more than 20 minutes. You're done. You do not have the time for this. So everything's now down to just and you know what's happening? Our attention span is the worst it's ever been. We have one. We could say it's this. We don't even have an attention span anymore. It's gone. It's gone. Right? Reading, writing, all this stuff is out the window. We don't stop long enough to think things through anymore, so we just listen to what someone says and repeat it. We're not critical thinkers. We just mimic and parrot what we're hearing because we ain't got time to look it up ourselves and figure the thing out and come up with an original idea. That's all out the window too. Nobody's original thinkers anymore. Because you don't have the time to sit there. You didn't have the time to read it. And you're definitely, if you didn't have time to read it, you're not going to have time to critically think the thing through and then come up with what your conscience, what you in the Spirit has worked out. Well, that's just what he says. Whether it's on media or even in the church. Well, my pastor says, that doesn't go nowhere. You need to be able to prove what you believe, not because your pastor said it. You got to be able to own that. And that's whether it's in church or in the world. Any substance or depth in anything. Prayer meetings are a thing of the past because it takes too long and the payoff's not there. I'm going to spend an hour in prayer and walk out. Well, what was that all about? I didn't get anything. I ain't doing that again. So there's no such thing as prayer meetings anymore. We're not connected. We're too connected and addicted to our electronic devices to engage in any real meaningful relationship regarding life. I was in a restaurant and I saw a family, and the mom was on her phone, the dad was on his phone, the little teenage girl was on her phone, and the 5-year-old had an iPad. And this went on until the food came. I watched it. Now that's not everybody, but I did see that. And then when you see couples together, they're both on their phone, and no, they're not even talking to each other. And if they don't have the devices, they don't even know what to say to each other. They just look around. This is where we are. This is not condemnation. This is me observing what's going on in our world, and we fell into it. We're part of it. Maybe you're not, but most people are. And when we do pray, it's 15, 30-second Hail Mary, and out the door we go. Or when we're in trouble. And it's really us doing number 14. It's us doing all the talking and zero listening. I ain't got time to listen. You need to hear me, God. I got 15 seconds here. I got 30 seconds. Listen to me. And if God doesn't speak in the next few minutes, you know what's funny is Moses, and you may not know this, and this is in the beginning how God deals with man. God told Moses to come up to the mountain. How long was he up there for? Huh? Come on, you guys gotta know. How long was Moses on the mountain? 40 days and 40 nights. To get 10 commandments? To get 10 things? I can tell you the 10 things in 30 seconds. I can tell you I can repeat the 10 commandments in 30 seconds. And he's up there 40 days and 40 nights. You think that it was all conversing? He's sitting there waiting. And God will show up when he wants to show up. But you have to wait it out. And then when he gets down the bottom of the hill and he sees them playing games and he breaks the 10 commandments, guess where he goes right after that? Back up to the mountain for how long? 40 days and 40 nights. That dude didn't get a break. His reprieve was about 24 hours before he was back up there for another 40 days and 40 nights. And if you think it all was God speaking, come on, he's waiting. He's waiting. And this is how God operates, but we've lost this understanding, and therefore I think we're all wandering around because we're not waiting. If you're not waiting, we're wondering. Anyway, you can read the rest of those and see that Jesus went up to the mountain early in the morning. What do you think he was up there in the mountain doing? Okay, how was he praying?
Talking to the Father.
Talking to the Father. But, again, remember what he says. I don't do anything unless I hear my Father or see my Father. So that means he wasn't doing much talking. He was waiting to hear the Father. Because if he's talking, he's dictating to God. And he was not dictating to his Father. He was waiting and receiving what he was waiting on, hearing what he was waiting on. Don't sit there and think he did all the talking, because he just told you, he says, my teaching's not my own. I don't tell God what to do. I hear what he's doing, and I follow suit. Okay? But if Jesus got up early in the morning to do this, And then he'd break away in the afternoon to do this. And then he'd stay up late at night to do this. And sometimes he didn't sleep at all, but did it all night. Now, why would he have to wait on God for all that? If he was waiting on the Father, and that's what he did, what do you got? Some secret thing going on that's not what you ought to do or should do? We're not. If Jesus did it, why? And you got to ask, if Jesus did it, why am I not doing it? Is it not required of me? Am I better than Jesus? I have to wait on the Lord. I just showed you. If you do a search on the word waiting on the Lord, there's so many, we'll never cover them all. Not in this series, we won't. There's too many. And yet, how many messages have you heard waiting on God? Or how many people have you talked to? What'd you do? What'd you do today? Well, I waited on God. We don't use that term, I waited on God. We'll say pray because that's what you did. You did all the talking. You did no waiting. You did no, waiting and talking are two different things. Waiting and talking, waiting and praying are two different things. Though they can be done together, they're separate. And you're not going to like waiting. I'm going to tell you that right now because you don't like it in the real world, and you're not going to like it in the spiritual world, but you're going to have to train yourself. That's why I call it a battle. This is going to be one of your biggest battles, is to train yourself to wait. Because it's not being taught, and it's not part of Christianity, though it was in the early church. So what is waiting? We saw it in the faith series a little bit that we just got out of. And that was, you have to go to the Father to wait on the Father to hear what He has to say and give you faith. Because faith comes by hearing, and you got to wait on Him to speak. So we got into a little bit in the faith messages, waiting on God for faith. I have to wait for God to get faith. Hebrews 5:8. We looked at this scripture Thursday night. Though He, Jesus, were a son, yet learned He obedience by the things which He suffered. That word in the Greek, obedience, has the connotation of logos in it, and it means the Word. So Jesus learned the Word, the speaking Word of the Father, by the things He went through, meaning that He would go to the Father and wait on the Father for a word about what He was facing, about what He was going through. He just didn't say, hey, I'm going to weigh the pros and cons, and if the pros outweigh the cons, that's what we're going to do. No. He was never allowed to do that. He would never do that. Well, it seems like a good thing to do. He would never do that. He waited to hear the Father about the things He was going through. So He ran to the speaking voice. And if the voice wasn't speaking, He had to wait. Okay? But all this takes time. It's not an instantaneous drive-through to hear God. It takes time for God to unveil Himself. And no one has the time for this today. In fact, we are too busy, and this already sounds like an impossibility to you. You're probably not even interested about waiting. Because I feel that tension as well, being a product of this culture in which we all are a part of. When you try, if this is something you're led into, which can't imagine you're not, it's biblical, you're going to find out that it's going to be very difficult for your mind to stop thinking. That's going to be a battle to quiet your mind down enough to engage God. Listening is a lost art because we do all the talking. Writing is a lost art because we don't got time to write anything down or journal God's thoughts. And note-taking is a lost art, so we're going to always forget what we hear. Just things there. They're there. And you know this is the product of the culture that we're living in. And we can't be that. Romans chapter 9, Paul talks about a little bit of discipline, training. And he says, I buffet my body. Means he does not let his mind wander when it wants to. He doesn't eat when the stomach says I'm hungry. He doesn't let the body tell him what to do. The body was made for him. He's not going to be a slave to the dictates of his flesh. But by the Spirit, he's going to rule and control his own body. And he says in Romans 9, sometimes it gets tough. And I'm in a battle against my five senses. I'm in a battle against my appetites. My body wants to sleep. You don't think Jesus wanted to sleep? You don't think Jesus' body wanted to take 8 hours? And the Father was like, no, I want this time with me and you tonight. We're staying up tonight. Or I'm too busy, God. I've got this going on, so now I'm glued and I am a slave to the time, to the clock, and to the schedule. And Paul says we've got to take control of the flesh. That's why he says walk in the Spirit, so you don't fulfill the desires of the. So Paul says it's going to be a battle. And so I challenge you this week, when you sit to wait on God, your mind is going to go off in at least 100 different directions. And you'll have to grab that thought and harness it and bring it back. You'll get sleepy, so get up and walk around. I'm going to tell you the dynamics because your body is not able to wait on God. Your flesh cannot and it will not wait on God. I'm going to read something on the radio this week. I was going to read it, but Augustine, one of the church fathers, however you want to pronounce his name, he says your mind can tell your hand to pick up this coffee and take a drink. And it happens so fast, you don't even think about it. Because the mind is talking to the body. Now, what happens when the mind debates the mind? See, the body will yeah. But when the mind says to the mind, we can't do this anymore, then the mind resists the mind. Remember I said Jekyll can't fix Hyde? Well, you got to listen to I'll put it on the radio this week on Augustine. He says your mind is divided. You'll want to do something, and then another part of your mind won't want to do it. So you're going to have this battle. So what I'm saying is while you're waiting, your mind is waiting on God, but your mind will come up with a million things to think of you got to do. Your mind will entertain a million different things, and you're going to have a hell of a battle, because I guarantee you, as a byproduct of this culture, you don't control your mind. Your mind controls you. And this can only be done by the Spirit. It can only be done by the Spirit. That's why he says renew the mind. Transformation comes by the renewing of the mind. The Spirit has to aid the mind in waiting. Otherwise, your flesh is going to try to do something, your other part of your flesh. Jekyll and Hyde, neither one wants to wait on God. Can't. It's going to have to be by the Holy Spirit. Jekyll may want to, but Hyde will rule out, and Jekyll will fall into line. You know how that works? How many have had that happen? You've spent some time with God, and your mind went somewhere, and you're like, and you got up and did whatever your mind said you got to do. Or, hey, you know what people tell you to do? Get a pen and paper and write that down, and then get it out of your head. So you can, don't do that. That doesn't work. It might sound good. I used to try that. I've heard that. And I'm like, okay, let me write that down. So get out of my head. So what ends up happening? Something else comes to write down. Something else comes to write down. And then you're thinking about the thing you're writing down. Cancel the thought when it comes. That's the only way to do this. When that thought comes, no. And focus right back on God. And you got to be adamant about this. You'll never wait or successfully wait. You'll try and fail. But to successfully do it, I'm telling you, it's going to be a battle. Battle in the mind. Because your mind wants to go a million different directions. Is this making sense? And where am I at? I don't know where I'm at in these notes. Discipline, Romans 9. So Paul says, I beat my body black and blue. I'm not going to let it think like that. I'm telling you, I am here to wait on God. You got to be adamant with yourself. And I think that's the Spirit in you being jealous for God's presence that will do that for you, through you. It's not for you to do. It's for you to say, decide I'm going the way of the Spirit, not the way of the flesh in this thing. Because my flesh, and it's not that the flesh is bad, it's just not going to do it without the Holy Spirit. It's not able to do it without the Holy Spirit. All right? Now another thing is that you're going to have to refuse the patterns that you have been accustomed to. The pattern of picking up that damn phone every morning. And it is a damned phone. It's a damned device. Your first thoughts ought to be God, not who did something or said something on Facebook to find out what went on while I was sleeping, what news cycle happened while I went to bed. Because what happens is when you pick up that phone, oh, look at those, I didn't know those two were together. And now you're thinking about them, or you're thinking about the pictures, you're thinking about what's going on with them. And you'll never gain that morning to God when you go down that rabbit hole. You gotta say to yourself, the phone, I'm not going to the phone. That's for another hour. That's for another time. But that's up to you. You don't have to do none of this. You can stay wandering. Got my device, and I'll just wander around with my device. I'll just wander around with my thoughts. It's up to you, because no one can make you do this. Spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak. What do you want to do? Who are you going to side with? You going to side with your flesh or side with what the Spirit is wanting to do? That's going to be your call. All I can do is encourage you this morning and let you see the truth. And hopefully this truth will set you free into a better way of living. Now, let me ask you this. If you allow your children to do whatever they want, they won't do nothing that's productive for them. And I'm going to tell you, we're allowing our flesh to do what it wants, and it's really, in the long haul, eternally, is not doing anything for us. Watching that news cycle every day, eternally, has no benefit to you. Now you say I'm being mean? Paul said, physical exercise brings what? Little profit. In this life. Brings absolute, so you got big biceps. So you can run a marathon. What does that do in the life to come? You got a clean house? You painted every room? Looks good? But what profit does that gain you in the world to come? You got to come to terms with this. I'm not against that stuff, but it's always the forefront. This stuff's always in the forefront while we think God in the background should be doing his part. He's in the forefront. He's not, I'm going to tell you, he's not going to be happy running in the background of your life, because that means he's not Lord. Okay? It's going to take a while. Let me just encourage you what's going to happen. It's going to take several days to quiet yourself down, to learn this. And maybe that's why it took Moses 40 days and 40 nights. Maybe it took him 38 days to learn how to be still and know that he is God so he can receive the 10 Commandments. Are you willing to put in that kind of time? To know that, man, I'm going to put in, and we'll talk about that, because you may not be able to sit still for an hour. Okay. Then just like, can anybody just take off right now and run 10 miles? No. What do you got to do? Where do you got to start? I think you got to start walking a little bit, right? From the couch to a marathon. That just doesn't happen by osmosis, and it does not happen overnight. So don't get discouraged. I can't. Yeah, you can. You can wait 5 minutes. Can you wait 5 minutes for the Lord? And in that waiting for 5 minutes, you fight every thought that tries to take dominance. Nope, put it behind me. Put it behind me. Put it behind me. Nope. 5 minutes. Then go to 10 minutes. Then go to 15 minutes. That's the best advice I can give you, because I didn't get there overnight. I've learned, and this God has been doing this waiting on me behind my back, not in the background, but he's been doing it, and I didn't even know that he was doing it. If anybody sees me live life, this is what you would see. Every now and then throughout the day, you would see me sit down in my chair, no TV on, no nothing, and I'm just sitting there. Now what I'm doing is I'm meditating on God, and I'm waiting. And I didn't even know that was part of this. He showed that to me this week. He's been doing this, not in long periods of time, but in sound bites, little 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you're also going to need the time where you sit there for however long he wants you to sit there. That's up to him and you by the Spirit. He may have you there for an hour. This is actually develop the art of waiting. This is what's happening is you are disciplining your flesh to sit down, and he'll wait for you to discipline your flesh to sit down, and then he'll start talking. So I'm going to tell you right now what I sense in my spirit is going to happen with most of us is that you're going to spend a lot of time waiting with absolutely nothing happening. Because he's trying to get you in that mode of waiting. And he knows the battle that's going to be going on. Oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to do that. The mind goes here. He says, you've got to beat that body black and blue so it doesn't have its way. Romans 9, the last few verses. Paul says, this is what you've got to do. Because the flesh doesn't want to wait. Okay, does that make sense? Look at this one. Stillness. You ever heard that term? Stillness? Yeah. Psalms 46:10 says, be still and know that I am God. What does it require? How many have told to be still? How many told their kids to be still? Huh? What do you mean by that when you tell them, be still? What are you meaning to them when you say, be still? No one's ever used that term, be still?
Stop and wait.
Yeah, just don't do anything. Just sit there, be still, don't move. I don't want to see you blink an eye. And we'll wait till we get into that verse. But again, this is all introduction today. God says that there has to be seasons and times that we're still. And that means be still, don't move, don't be thinking over here, don't let your mind wander over. Be still, because in that God will unveil himself to you in the stillness of waiting. I'm not wondering here, I'm waiting, I'm focused, and I'm waiting to hear from God. And I have to be still. And Jesus was still in the storm. Remember we talked about this Thursday, they him in the storm? Remember he's in the bottom of the boat? Disciples are freaking out. They're all over the boat, man. They're everywhere. And the storm's beating the hell out of the boat, right? What's Jesus doing? He's being still. Now, if they had faith in him, they too would have been. And I know that doesn't make sense, but let me ask you a question. Would they have made it to the other side no matter what those disciples did? Would they have made it? Why would they have made it to the other side? Boy, that's so key. We're all over the place because we don't trust what God is saying and doing. We can't be still because life moves us all over the place. And there's a stillness to everything you go through. There's a waiting period. There's a time that we are to be still. Everything we go through requires stillness and waiting. Not troubleshooting. Don't fix it. Wait on it. Or him in it. Making sense? I'll skip 5. Or the Galatians. We're not going to hit that. Let's close. Waiting is not easy. It's even harder today than it was for the culture in Jesus' time. They didn't have all the devices and all the distractions. They haven't been programmed in the way that we are. We're too busy. We've got too many distractions. Our minds are occupied always with something. It's always. How many of you have made this statement? It's always something. It's always something. Why do you think it's always something? It's a distraction to you waiting and cultivating your personal presence with God. Being still, waiting, praying, meditating, and listening. Get all that. We must slow our lives down and simplify our lives. Simplify our lives. Because the more you make your life hectic, the more you're not going to have time to wait. I hate for all of us, and I know it's going to happen to a degree, that God says to us, you were too busy. You thought I would just do this stuff by osmosis, without relationship, without waiting, without hearing. You thought I should just always be on task, on key in everything that you're going through without putting the time in to hear. And look at your life. Look at everything that troubled you. Look at everything that hindered you. Look at every bad thing that happened. Look at, if you had just waited on me, you would have heard. If you would have waited on me, you would have had the faith for this. If you would have waited on me, you wouldn't have made this decision. You could have done this. If you would have waited on me and became still, there'd been no stress and anxiety in that period of your life. And I'm telling you, we're going to go, oh my God, how much we went through for nothing. Because the things you worried about are the wood, hay, and stubble. The things that you are concentrating on has zero value in the life to come. The things you're busy about has absolutely zero payoff in rewards in eternity. Why? It's insanity. What are we doing with our lives? This morning I took about an hour. I said, I need to simmer on this. I need to let this cook in my spirit, this word. And one of the things that I just got, and I'm like, oh man, was like, in the last several years of my life, I can't even put a time frame on it because it seems like it's always been this way, that I have made things way more, things that are even biblical, things that are even godly, church-wise, ministry-wise, people-wise. I've put so much before God, so that these things have become idols, and then when the idols weren't paying off, then you get into the frustration, the disappointment, and the burnout, and everything you go through. And I don't know how he did it, he'll do it in his own supernatural way with you, but what he showed me was how I had put when he said, look, when it's all said and done, what was the most important thing in your life in this era, in that era, and things to come? What is the most important thing in your life? It's Him. Not everything else has got to be put under Him. He must, Colossians, Christ must have preeminence in all things. And He doesn't. And we're all guilty. That's what I'm saying. This is not me preaching to you. This is me taking this word to heart for myself. And I'm a byproduct, as well as you are, of this world, this society. We're so influenced by it, we fall right into prey. You don't think so? I would guarantee that Christians have the same amount of monitor time on their phone as non-believers. You know that little thing that says you had 6 hours on your screen time, 6 hours. I guarantee you're in the average of the world. How did it happen? I guarantee you most of you watch the same amount of TV as the world does. And the average is 4 to 6 hours a day. Some people get up 2 hours in the morning, throw an hour or two in the day. And that's okay. I mean, I'm not condemning nobody. I'm saying, what else could I be doing with my time? Here's an idea. Wait on God. Turn it off and wait on God. But you don't know how to be still. You've not been trained how to be still. You need a device. You need to be entertained. Some of you can't even sleep without some noise called a fan in the background because you need noise to sleep. How did this all happen? This is not the will of God. God didn't say, oh, let's just keep noise on. I'll give you, and I'm not picking on this guy. Mike Murdoch, I just say him because I remember him saying he can't stand quiet. He has to have a fan on at night. He has to have music on in the daytime. He's got to have the TV on in the background. He's got to have, he called it movement, life, whatever. And that's okay. That's what he feels. I'm not condemning him. I'm simply saying, when is there the quiet hours? When do you be still means you can't have anything out there. When the waters are still, that means what? They're not moving. There's no action. There's nothing. Dead, quiet, solitude. Now you do with that what you want. But that's what came to mind. I remember him saying that, and I'm thinking, where's the quiet time? Where's the stillness? So in the next few sessions, this is what we're going to be talking about. Training ourselves, seeing the benefits of waiting, training ourselves to be in the ministry of waiting on the Lord. Remember what he says in that verse. They that wait on the Lord will gain strength. They will mount up. But they've got to wait. There's got to be that process. I know you don't like it, but it's a process, and we've got to do it. Here's something God said to me, number 5, in the closing right there, number 5. God is not medicine that you take when you're in need. I go to him when he has to be the daily vitamin. He's got to be the sustenance and the substance of your life. Not some add-on that you go to. He's got to be the daily waiting, the daily being still. And really, if you think about this, you do this at your job to a degree. But if you didn't have a job description and you didn't know really what to do every day, and so you had to go to the foreman or your boss or somebody and say, what are we doing today? Because you don't know. Some jobs are like that. Daniel, you probably don't know what you're doing Wednesday. Well, you may if you have a schedule. I don't know what you have. But more than likely, you don't know what you're doing Wednesday. Do you know what you're doing tomorrow at your work? Or how do you know?
We get handed work orders every morning.
There you go. Perfect. That's perfect. So is he worried about, oh man, I hope I do the right thing? He's not worrying about a vision. He's not worried about making something happen at his job. He's going to go there, and what time of the day, what time in the morning do you get the handout?
We start at 7, so anytime after that.
Have you ever, has the handout been late? We had to wait?
Because it goes to all the different crews.
So you got to wait. You can't do anything until you get the handout.
Yeah.
So why we don't treat God like that? Now, I know you got to go to work. No one's talking about that kind of. Well, Greg, I have to be at work by 8. I have to wait for God to tell me to go to work. Now you're being stupid. I'm not talking about the work is part of the design of your life that He has. So He's not going to spoon feed you. Use common sense, okay, to a degree. But I'm talking about all this free time that we have on the way to work. How about not listening to music and turning the radio off and just hear God? See, but you don't. But I'm not going to hear. See, what if you do this Monday and you turn the radio off and you don't hear anything from God? You won't wait on Him again tomorrow because you didn't get anything. Because all you know and have been accustomed to is a payoff. I didn't get anything. He didn't talk. He's not speaking to me. Radio comes back on. What about if He says it's going to take 30 days of you sitting in your car with the radio off before I say one word to you? We don't want to put that kind of time and sacrifice in. We don't have the faith that He would even do it. I'm going to take you back to Moses. I really believe it's a huge possibility that it took God 38 days to quiet him down before He could give him the 10 Commandments. Because I know human nature. The guy was raised in Egypt. He was raised in the influence and custom and culture of Egypt. Why do you think God led the children of Israel to the waters of Meribah, bitter waters, in the wilderness after He delivered them from Egypt? Does anybody know why?
To clean their systems.
Yeah, there was chemicals in that water. That's why it was called bitter waters. When they drank it, they spit it out. They didn't like it. And God says, no, you drink this water because it's a cleansing agent, and it's going to clean out your system. In other words, you're going to get diarrhea from this. Because I want the poisons of the foods of Egypt out of your system. So if God had to do that to their body to cleanse them from the food of Egypt, what about their minds that was raised in Egyptian culture? The world, which represents the world. He's got to renew their mind. And I guarantee you, Moses was educated in the Egyptian system. His mother was who?
Princess.
The Pharaoh's daughter. He was groomed to be the next Pharaoh. So his mind had... So I guarantee you, it took 38 days to quiet him down to hear God. In my opinion, you can't prove me right, you can't prove me wrong. But what do you think was going on for 40 days and 40 nights? What if God just wants to sit you down? You know, you take a husband and a wife. Is it okay if they just sit down and not say nothing to each other? Do they always got to be talking? Always got to be touching each other? Or is it cool that they can just sit together and say nothing? And they love the presence of the person. They don't have to have anything going on. They don't feel like they missed anything. They were like, hey, now some people don't understand that concept and may get mad, and you do have to talk, don't hear what I'm not saying. You do got to touch. I'm saying, but it doesn't always have to be something going on. That you can sit there and just enjoy the presence of another person without even getting anything from them. That makes sense? And you know this to be true, is if your spouse, maybe you went somewhere for a week and the house is empty, the kids went somewhere, the house is empty. Now single people may not know that, but because you're prone to singleness. But when you have a lot of people around and they're not around anymore, you sense, well, they're not there. There's something about just sitting in the presence of the Lord. He doesn't have to speak in either of you. Learn that. Isn't it just cool to hang out with God and not get anything from Him? But just to sit in His presence and know that I and me and Him, I waited. He didn't show up. That's okay. I was in His presence. And I'll tell you, you're going to get things just from that you won't even know. Just being in His presence will do something. How can it not? How can it not? Being in His presence do something, whether He moves, talks, ministers, or what have you. So, let me just close with this. One statement. If we're not waiting, then we're wondering. And it's probably showing in your life. And the answer is we've got to get back to the art of waiting on God. And it's going to be a battle. You're going to have to train yourself to wait. And like I said, what I feel like is like you may go through days and your flesh is, I promise you, your flesh is not, and you're going to get every interruption possible to man. If you're a mother and your kids get up at 7 o'clock every morning, I promise you they'll be up at 5. Tell me I'm not lying. Huh? Nobody ever calls from 6 to 9. But the minute I put that time aside, they call. This one calls, that calls. Watch it happen. I told you, if you walk with me, you'll believe in the devil. I'm not lying. I'm not lying. Let's stand. Just prepare for every possible distraction coming your way. Because the devil does not want you in God's presence. He does not want it. Heavenly Father, open our eyes to this. Give us the grace to wait, because it comes from you. Give us every possible means of grace to introduce back, or maybe never, but into our lives, waiting. Waiting on you. You're the focus of the wait. You are the focus of the wait. And help us get back to waiting. Because if we're not waiting, then we're wandering.